top axe that you see here is the Gransfors Bruk Small Forest Axe. And this particular one I have owned for years and I have used it extensively. And in my opinion, this is probably the best bushcrafting type axe that's made today. The bottom axe is a Gransfors Bruk Wildlife Hatchet, which I've owned only for several months now. I have used it lightly for several different projects. I'm sure in looking at the two you can see a difference in the color of the wood and just the appearance overall. And I wanted to talk about that today because early on I prepared this axe up top for long-term service, and that's what I need to do with this wildlife hatchet today. Hello and welcome to the Black Hat Bushcraft channel. Today I wanted to continue talking on a topic that I introduced in my last video, which was rendering birch oil. And when I went through and rendered that oil, I had a purpose for it. Years ago when I acquired this Gransfors Bruk Small Forest Axe, I treated all the wood, metal, and leather, so the entire axe, with birch oil. And it gave the axe a very nice appearance. It kind of darkened the wood and brought the grain out a little bit. I also applied fixin wax to the handle as well, which really gave it a nice, good texture. It's also waterproofed it to some degree, sealed the grain of the wood and also the leather. And I've been very pleased with that treatment and how it's held up on the axe. So this wildlife hatchet has had no treatments other than just a little sweat with some light use. And so the reason I rendered that birch oil was I wanted to prepare this axe for long-term service too. When you invest in a tool like a Gransfors Bruk axe, and the amount of money that you put into it, I look at that as an heirloom quality tool and something that you want to preserve and take care of for the long haul. So hence, that's the reason for this process. This is the birch oil that I rendered down in the last video, and just in case you didn't see that one, there is a step-by-step guide of how you can render your own birch oil if you're interested. But this is what I'm going to be applying to the handle of the axe. Alright, whenever you work with birch oil, it has a very strong smell, and it will stain your hands, as I already have mine stained right now. But the good thing about that is it will stain your axe handle as well. And before I get started on this, go ahead and take this leather off. So I'm going to be more careful with my axe handle from here. Excuse me, my axe blade. I hear my nephews on the four-wheeler around the corner there, so I may see them in a few minutes. But all I'm going to do is just apply this birch oil into the wood like you would any other stain. I did shake this up really good just before I started this. It's a very simple process. It's already starting to make the wood look a little bit darker, which I like. Brings out the grain, but most importantly it protects the wood and the leather. So some of the other things that birch oil is supposed to be good for is insect repellent. And I'm not going to tell you that I have experience with that because I've never tried to use it as insect repellent. It's also known as a medicinal essential oil, and it's supposed to be good for skin irritations and such things as that. Again, that is something that I've researched but not practiced, and I don't like to talk about things too much or too much in detail that I haven't actually experienced myself. Like I said, I've done research on it just to see what the benefits of the oil is, but I've not actually applied it, so I can't tell you as to its effectiveness. And this is really the only thing that I've used birch oil for, is applying it as a preservative to my tools. And I have applied it to a knife, to several sheaths, and of course to that axe handle there. Once I finish applying the birch oil to this, I'm going to come back and use my homemade fixin wax after it dries out and give it a nice coating of that as well. And between those two, it does a great job of giving your axe a good feel and protecting it as well. You can really start to see in the grain of the wood how it's taking that oil in. It just brings out that grain so nicely. I want to let all this dry completely before I go back and put the fixin wax on, because the fixin wax will put like a waterproof coating on all of this, and I don't want to seal any moisture into the wood. So that's going to be something I'll have to come back and do. after this all dries out. Down in the bottom of that bottle is where the most thick part of that oil was, and it's really applying that nice color to it. That looks pretty good to me. What I'm going to do now is go over the leather. Just rub some of that birch oil down into this leather real good, especially on those outside edges. You can see how good that dyes the leather almost. And it'll make a nice preservative as well. Alright, finished product. Looks nice, and most importantly, it'll preserve it. Alright, now that I've given my axe ample time to dry out, you can see a lot of difference now in the handle as far as the wood grain. It's a lot darker, and while that to me is attractive in appearance, the important thing is just that it's preserving that wood. And the last thing I have here is some of my homemade fixin wax. And I actually have a video where I made this wax, and this is part of the wax that was actually made in the video. So all I do with that is just come back here and just go over this thing with this wax and coat it down really good. That'll help to seal the grain of the wood. I also apply it to my metal, which is good. It protects that as well. And just work this stuff into the wood, into the grain. It's a very simple process. It's just a matter of taking the time to go through and do it. Like I mentioned before, when you have these nice quality tools like Gransfors axes, you know, it's worth taking the time to preserve those things properly. And I'm sure there's a lot of other ways to do this, but you know, as a bushcrafter, I want to look for the way that I can do it myself, more self-reliant. It's amazing the difference in how that wood feels now between the birch oil, and really the fixin wax makes the big difference. And I'll let that soak in good, probably for another 24-48 hours, and then I may end up applying some more. Just depends on how it feels in that time. You can see what it looks like up close. It looks really good to me like that, and it feels good. Well preserved. I also like to come back with that fixin wax and apply it to my leather as well. And that does help to waterproof this leather and preserve it as well. It's the same process. You just rub a little on with the block of wax, and then use your fingers. It's the best way I've found, and just kind of work it into the leather. Nothing fancy about this process. And therefore that makes it easy to do in the field, like I'm doing right now. And I could be doing this at home, of course, but I'd rather get out here and do it in the fresh air, being in my element. That makes that leather nice and supple, soft, and again, waterproof. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in for this quick look at how I've prepared my bushcrafting style axes for service. In my mind, applying this birch oil and this beeswax and fixin wax to the handle does a great job of beautifying the tool and also protecting it. Obviously, I could go to the store and spend money on some type of a commercial product to do the same job and possibly do it better. But I'm a self-reliant type person, so if I have something available to me that I can take off the landscape or make fixin wax for myself, I'd rather do it that way than to go out and buy something to do it with. It's just my mindset. Also, there are some really good videos on YouTube on rendering birch oil and also using birch oil. I know the first video I ever saw years ago was from a gentleman named Lonnie over at Far North Bushcraft and Survival. Excellent video, excellent channel, so please go and check that one out if you're interested. Also, Dave Canterbury on the Pathfinder School channel, or Wilderness Outfitters, has a great video and talks about some of the benefits of using birch oil as well. So those are some other resources that you can go if you're interested in learning more about this process. Anyway, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I look forward to talking to you with another video as soon as possible. And until then, as always, take care and God bless.